Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining the session today. So, in this session, we are going to look at the number one reason restore fail. And it's probably not what you expect. Most of the time, it's not backups failing, it's something called operational drift, happening silently in the background. So we'll break down what that means, why it's so commonly missed, and most importantly, how MSPs can prevent it and turn this into a more proactive, value-driven services. So let me quickly walk you through what we will cover today. First, we will talk about something called operational drift, basically how backup and DR environments slowly change over time without anyone noticing. Things like agents breaking, credentials expiring, or policies getting tweaked. The problem is these issues usually go undetected, alerts get missed, and in many cases, restores aren't tested often enough. So everything looks fine until it is not. We'll break down the main causes of this drift and more importantly, how it impacts your ability to recover when it really matters. Then I'll share a simple checklist you can use right away to prevent these issues. We'll also touch on how MSPs are turning this into a proactive services, adding more value for customers. So let's get started. So let's start with a simple but an important idea. Backup don't fail, environments drift. In most cases, if you look at your backup dashboard, everything looks healthy, jobs are running, reports are green, and from an admin perspective, it feels like things are working perfectly. But the reality is very different. While backup job shows success, restore readiness is actually degrading silently in the background. And this is where most organizations and even MSPs get caught off guard. So what do we mean by drift? Drift is basically a gradual misalignment between three things: what your backup is configured to do, what your actual infrastructure looks like today, and what your recovery expectations are. Over time, these three starts to move out of sync, and the key things here is it doesn't happen suddenly. It happens slowly, quietly, and often without triggering any major alerts. So let me give you a few very common examples. Credentials expire, and suddenly backups may still run, but certain data isn't being captured correctly. Agents stop updating, so you are no longer fully protecting newer system or changes. Or storage fills up silently, which can impact retention, recovery points, or even the ability to complete restores. Individually, these might seem like small issues, but together, they create a situation where your backups look fine, but your ability to recover is compromised. And that brings us to the most important takeaway on this slide. A green backup report does not equal a successful restore. This is the gap we see across the industry. Most teams are focused on backup success, but not enough on recovery assurance. And that's exactly the shift we are talking about here. Moving from being just a backup admin to delivering a backup assurance service. Because at the end of the day, customers don't care if backups ran. They care if they can recover quickly when something goes wrong. And that's what we are going to focus on for the rest of this session: how to identify this drift early, prevent it, and turn it into something proactive and valuable. So let's dig into the real question. What actually breaks restores? Because when something goes wrong and a restore fails, the first instinct is usually to blame the backup. But in reality, that's rarely the case. Most backups do run successfully. The real issue is that something in the environment has changed over time, and that change wasn't tracked or validated. There are 4 key areas where we constantly see this happen. First, agent drift. Agents are the foundation of most backup systems. But over time, they can become outdated, disconnected, or misaligned with the current environment. Maybe a server was patched, maybe the OS was changed, or maybe that agent just stopped communicating properly. So from a dashboard perspective, things may still look okay, or at least not critical. But in reality, you are no longer fully protecting that system the way you think you are. And when you try to restore, that's when the gap shows up. Second, credential failures. This is one of the most common and most overlooked issues. Credentials expire, passwords get rotated, permissions change. And when that happens, backups might still run, but not completely or not correctly. For example, you might lose access to certain applications, database, or system states. The tricky part is it doesn't always show a hard failure. So again, everything looks fine until you actually try to recover. Third is a policy drift. Backup policies are usually configured once and then left as is. But environments are constantly evolving, new VMs are added, workloads shift, priorities change. So if policies does not evolve with the environment, you end up with gaps. So what you think is protected may not actually be covered anymore. And during a restore, that's when you realize certain system files or recovery points are missing. And finally, storage issues. Storage is another silent contributor. Capacity fills up, retention limits get hit, performance can degrade over time, and often this happens gradually and quietly in the background. Backups may still complete, but you might be losing older restore points or not meeting your recovery objectives. So again, no obvious failure, but a real impact when you need to restore. So now if you step back and look at all four of these, agent drift, credentials issues, policy drift, and storage, they all have one thing in common. They are not sudden failures. They are slow, incremental changes that happen over time. And because they are gradual, they are easy to miss, especially if you are only monitoring backup job success. So when a real incident happens, a ransomware attack, a system crash, or a data loss, that's when all of these small issues surface at once. And that's why the restore fails. So the key takeaway here is, it is not about whether your backups are running. It's about whether your environment is still aligned with your recovery expectations. And that's exactly what we'll focus on next. How to identify these issues early and prevent them before they impact recovery. So now that we understand what causes restore failures, the next logical question is, why are MSPs missing these issues? Because the reality is, these problems are not hidden, but they are also not obvious. There are four key reasons this happens. First, the alert fatigue. So in most environments, there are a lot of alerts coming in every single day. Warnings, notifications, informational messages. It becomes noisy over time. And what happens naturally is teams start filtering mentally. This is not critical. I will look at it later. This can wait. So the important signals get buried in the noise. So that's how small issues like agent disconnects or credential warnings get ignored until they become bigger problems. Second, the backup completed successfully mindset. This is probably the biggest one. When you see a green across your dashboard, it creates a sense of comfort. You assume everything is working as expected. But as we discussed earlier, backup success does not equal recovery success. So you can have 100% successful backups and still fail during a restore. That gap is where most organizations get caught off guard. Third, no structural restore testing. Backups are automated, they run daily, sometimes multiple times a day. But restores, they're usually done only when needed. There is no consistent process to test. Can we actually recover this VM? Can we restore this database? How long does it take? Without that validation, you are essentially relying on assumption. And in a DR scenario, assumption is risk. And finally, No clear ownership of backup health. In many MSP environments, backups sit somewhere between teams, maybe infrastructure team, maybe operations, maybe support. So while everyone touches it, no one fully owns it end to end. There is no single person or process responsible for asking, are we actually recoverable right now? And when ownership is unclear, proactive validation usually doesn't happen. Now, when you combine all four of these, alert fatigue, false confidence, lack of testing, and no ownership, you get this reality. Most failures are not discovered during normal operations. They are discovered during a crisis, and that's why you see stats like this. So up to 90% of failures are only found when a restore is actually needed. At this point, the impact is already there: downtime, data loss, business disruption. So the real takeaway here is that this isn't about better backups, it's about better validation and accountability. Moving from a reactive approach where you find problems during failure to a proactive model where you continuously validate that everything will work before you need it. And that's exactly what we'll look at next. How MSPs can shift to the proactive approach and eliminate drift before it becomes a problem. So how do MSPs actually eliminate drift? The key is moving from reactive monitoring to a structured validation framework with checks at different intervals. Starting with weekly, you focus on operational health, review failed or warning alerts, and validate agent connectivity and hardware. This helps catch issues like disconnected agents or partial backups early. Then monthly, you move into a configuration validation, verify credentials, no expired accounts or permissions issues, and audit policy coverage to ensure all systems are actually protected. This is where you prevent gaps caused by environmental changes. And then quarterly, you validate what really matters: recoverability, run test restores at VM and file level, check RPO, RTO expectations, and review storage capacity and retention. Because backup success doesn't guarantee restore success, testing does. Now, to scale this across multiple environments, automation is critical. With alerting dashboards, you centralize and prioritize alerts instead of dealing with noise. With health reports, you get a continuous view of backup health, covering agents, policies, storage, and recoverability. And with SLA-based monitoring, you define thresholds and automate escalation and response, ensuring nothing slips through. So overall, this isn't just a checklist, it's a proactive assurance model. You continuously validate not just the backup run, but that recovery will actually work when it's needed. Now let's talk about opportunity here, because this isn't just a problem to solve, it's actually a revenue opportunity for MSPs. Most MSPs today are focused on managing backups, but what customers really want is confidence in recovery. That's where you can shift from being reactive to offering a backup assurance service. It starts with something simple: backup health checks, DR readiness assessments, restore testing reports. Now this is incredibly valuable to customers because it gives them something they usually don't have: visibility and confidence. They know their data can actually be recovered. It reduces the downtime risk, and it also helps with audit and compliance requirements, which is becoming more important for many businesses. The next is to package this. Instead of doing this as one-off activity, just turn into a monthly service. You can bundle in compliance reporting, regular validation, even offer SLA-backed recovery assurance. Creates a recurring revenue. It increases customer stickiness because you're deeply embedded in their operations, and helps you differentiate from competitors who are still just offering basic backup. So this shift is simple but powerful, from we manage your backups to we guarantee your ability to recover. And that's how you turn risk into revenue. So thank you for everyone for joining this session today. I hope it was very informative, and it would help you in your conversation with your customers. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.